Welcome to Literary Libations with Librarians in January. We're looking forward to sharing with you some of our favorite reads that we've been reading recently. As we share our titles, if you're interested in getting your hands on any of them, there's several ways to go about doing that. The first and perhaps the most efficient would be to simply call your local branch of the Monroe County Library System and talk to the staff there, and they'll be more than happy to assist you. As we talk about the books, you'll see what different formats they're available through the library, and some of them are available in physical formats, and for those you can go straight to our online catalog and request those, and that web address is on your screen now. You'll see that some of them are available through one of our digital platforms, so you can get them as ebooks or downloadable audiobooks, and those two platforms are Libby and Hoopla. And one of the little bonus things about Hoopla, if it's available there, most of the time it has a lightning bolt next to the title, and that means that there is never a wait and that lots of people can have the same item checked out on their device at the same time. I am Jennifer Graneski, and I am the Dundee Area Supervisor. And our question to kick us off for January is, what are you looking forward to reading in 2023? It's a brand new year. Is there something that you're kind of looking to learn? Is there an author you're excited about? And for me, I'm going to share two. And the first one is Stephen Graham Jones has a sequel to My Heart is a Chainsaw coming out in February. And NetGalley, and I want to get the publisher right, and I know I wrote it down. Maybe I didn't. But NetGalley and the publisher of the sequel, which is Don't Fear the Reaper, were gracious enough, so I have a digital advanced reader's copy, which I am actually reading right now, and it's already fabulous. And Stephen Graham Jones is part of the Blackfeet Nation. So he is Native American, and he writes amazing horror novels. If you haven't read The Only Good Indians, you really need to read that. So I'm super excited about Don't Fear the Reaper, and I'm looking forward to when I get off work and get to go home and read it. So that one I'm excited about. And then also Sylvia Moreno Garcia, who wrote Mexican Gothic, which was kind of a huge bestseller. She has a new book coming out in July called Silver Nitrate, and it sounds amazing and maybe a little bonkers, but it's set in 90s Mexico City, and it's based around this cursed film. And also because, you know, let's throw some Nazis in there. Sorry, I have a hair stuck in my mouth. Sorry. There's this belief that somehow there's like this magical silver nitrate that this Nazi somehow made this cursed film on. And so the curse passes through that somehow. I don't know. That's all I have, friends. But all of that 90s Mexico City, Sylvia Moreno Garcia, I'm down for it. Whatever you got, I'm going to be there and I'm going to be reading it. So those are my two that I'm looking forward to. And yes, both horror novels, which I know, shocker, but that's what I'm excited about reading. Also with us this week is Ashley Lyford, who is the Frenchtown area supervisor. And what are you looking forward to reading this year, Ashley?
So honestly, I don't have anything specific. Last year, I really did not read hardly anything, which I feel bad even saying. But I don't know, I couldn't focus, whatever. So this year, I'm just looking forward to reading in general. I'm already on my 5th book of the year, which blows my mind.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's been a busy, 20 days. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to reading more.
Yay. Good for you. Yeah, I think I've managed to finish one. Good job, me. So also with us this week is Kristen Brown, who is a sub throughout the Monroe County Library System. So she goes and sees all of our branches. And what are you looking forward to reading this year, Kristen?
So my title isn't really a new title for 2023, but I just started a new series I was going to talk about it today, but I've actually read so many great books lately that it was really hard to pick. But it's the third one in the series. It's by Jennifer Armentrout, and it's the From Blood and Ash series. And the third one is The Crown of Gilded Bones. And I've just been devouring that series. I picked it up on a whim, like me, I need something real quick to read. I usually read a lot of nonfiction, so I like to kind of switch off and go into fiction. Happened upon that series on a whim, and I've been just loving it. So I'm super excited. I think I have a physical copy waiting for me at one of the branches that I need to pick up. So I'll probably do that today and start reading that. So
how many books are in the series, do you know?
So she has the fifth one's actually coming out this year. So if I was far enough along, I could be like, oh, that one's coming out. But there's 5 total. So
okay. It's always good to know how I like to know what I'm committing to. Like once you start reading and you're like, oh, I'm so excited. You know, am I going to get a trilogy? Am I committing, you know, like Diana Gabaldon's series, which I have yet to read. Like,
where they just
of those. So that's a big commitment. So
I'm excited to see where this goes. So
great. Thank you, Kristen. And also with us is Jessica Otto, who is our head of collections at MCLS. And what are you looking forward to reading in 2023, Jessica?
One of the specific titles I'm looking forward in 2023 is, I think it comes out next Tuesday, actually. There is a new entry in the Nathan Heller mystery novels series. I think I talked about one of those books a while back on here. But yeah, it's a new one. It involves, my understanding is like millionaires and kidnappings and missing ransom monies. So, and somehow Nathan Heller once again finds himself in the middle of all of this. So I think it's called The Big Bundle. So I'm looking forward to reading that and going on another adventure with the private eye to the stars. And then just in general, one of my my personal goals for myself this year is to sort of get outside of my reading comfort level. With books, I tend to stick to reading the same things because I like them, but and not that I won't read kind of the same things, but I want to try to get a few more different items in there, just sort of expand my literary horizons, so to say, a bit. So we'll see how that goes as the year goes on.
Excellent. Thank you, Jessica. And I think I'm going to have Ashley kick us off and share what she's been reading and enjoying lately.
Sure. So I'm just going to go with books I just read because I'll forget otherwise. So first I'll talk about the title Stay Awake by Megan Golden. I literally just finished this like last weekend. So the main character's name is Liv, and like at first she lives with her best friend. Her best friend is dating someone. She is too. But so then like this book is told from a couple different perspectives, and it was kind of tricky because she bounces back and forth. So Liv was in like some sort of horrific accident. You don't know why at first or what it was. And so every time she falls asleep, when she wakes up, she thinks she's 2 years like in the past. And so she doesn't know anything. She wakes up and she's got like writing all over her arms, like saying, stay awake, don't trust anyone, you know, all this stuff. And she had been living in London. So she had like a social worker in London to help her through the trauma that she experienced. Wow, my Apple Watch just started talking. Sorry. So she had a social worker, and then there's a big murder, right? There's a huge murder that just happened, and written on the window was stay awake. So she's like, oh my God, I can't kill somebody. Yeah, that's not possible. She doesn't know what's happening. She's afraid of the police in the first place. So she just kind of keeps running and hiding while she can, remembering every time she wakes up, she doesn't know where she is. So at some point, the police contact her social worker in London, and they're like, we think she's here. Can you tell us about her, whatever? So the story goes on. She's kind of being hunted the whole time, not hunted, but maybe stalked. and she doesn't know what's happening, and it was kind of confusing, but I really loved it for some reason. I will say I'm not great with mysteries. Like, I like them, and maybe I don't pay enough attention, but I'm almost always surprised by like who did it. And I'm not going to say who did it, but when I got to the point where you do learn who did it, I was like, oh my God, I completely forgot he was even a character. Like, which I thought was amazing. My husband was home and I was like losing my mind. He didn't understand what was happening. So I really actually need someone to read this book and talk to me about it, because I want to know if I just wasn't paying attention or if like she really did set that up really well, because he was talked about towards the beginning of the book, but I really kind of forgot he existed. I was just shocked. So check that one out. And then the other book I want to talk about is The Rewind by Alison Wynne Scotch. This book was fun for me because it was set mostly in the 90s, which is just, I mean, I was not super old in the 90s, but I remember bits and pieces of it. And so the nostalgic part of this was good. Basically, your main character is going back to her college, her university, for her really good friend's wedding. She's in the wedding. She did not want to go because she's going to run into her ex-boyfriend, and there's some bad blood there. Neither one of them want to see each other. She's not dating anybody. He's about to propose to his girlfriend. So the morning after the rehearsal dinner, they wake up in their old dorm room together with wedding rings on. And they're like, what? Like, what happened? They have no idea how this happened. Maybe they drank too much. Who knows? But so the story is of them trying to go forward and figure out why they have wedding rings on. They can't possibly really be married, right? Like, that would be terrible. So there's a lot of like, fun banter back and forth because they don't like each other anymore, and just trying to figure out the story. So that was just like a fun rom-com that I really enjoyed. And I just like the 90s, flashbacks to it.
I also like the 90s. Lots of stuff happened for me in the 90s. So, yeah. Thank you, Ashley.
And next, I think I'll have Jessica share what she's been reading.
Are you troubled by recipe planning in the middle of the night? Do you experience feelings of dread in your kitchen or pantry? Have you or any of your family ever seen a spoon, spatula, or whisk? If the answer is yes, then don't wait another minute. Check out a copy of my first title, Ghostbusters, the official cookbook. Our courteous and efficient library staff and online catalog are on call 24 hours a day to serve all your hunger elimination needs. We're ready to cook with you. So if that bit of 1984 nostalgia made you smile, you may be the target audience for this brand new collection of interdimensional deliciousness, written by Eric Burnham with recipes by Jen Fujikawa. This book has a really cool premise. So not only does the cookbook exist in our universe, but it also exists in the ghost-busting universe as well. As the foreword and introduction explain, the idea of a Ghostbusters cookbook came about from Peter Venkman in the 80s as he was trying to find a way to help fellow Ghostbuster Ray Stantz pay off at least one of the 3 mortgages on his childhood home. The project was abruptly canceled, but was eventually completed over 30 years later with the help of podcast from Ghostbusters Afterlife. The book features 50 recipes inspired by the beloved 1984 Ghostbusters and the more recently released Ghostbusters Afterlife. It is divided into 5 sections: ethereal appetizers, manifesting the mains, spectral sides, supernatural sweets, and paranormal potables. It includes recipes such as egons, spores, molds, and fungus stuffed mushrooms, ugly little spuds, and of course, an obligatory big Twinkie recipe. Numerous marshmallow recipes can be found throughout the book as well. All 50 recipes include an introduction by characters from the films. Each recipe gives a difficulty rating from easy to difficult. The book contains recipes for every cooking skill level. It also lists if the recipes adhere to certain dietary considerations, such as if they're gluten-free, vegetarian, or vegan. The book is filled with mouth-watering food photography, scenes from the movies, and familiar Ghostbusters props, such as an Ecto-1 license plate, a PKE meter, and even a ghost trap. Ooh. But you may or not be able to see. Oh. The book concludes with an afterword by Peter Venkman, a section for notes, and a measurement conversion chart. So Ghostbusters, the official cookbook, is a must-have for foodies and paranormal investigative fans alike. It will give you some new recipes for everyday dining, special occasions, and of course could give you an entire menu for a Ghostbusters themed party. So if you were looking for a cookbook with paranormal inspired takes on classic food dishes, in the words of Ray Stantz, this is it. This is definitely it.
Nice.
So moving on to my second title, my second book is a heartwarming tale of the inspiration behind one of the most beloved children's characters of all time. Winnie, the True Story of the Bear Who Inspired Winnie the Pooh by Sally M. Walker, tells the remarkable tale of a real-life bear and the soldier that cared for her. So our story begins in 1914, not long after the start of the First World War. A young veterinarian and soldier, Harry Colburn, was heading across Canada in a train to a training camp in Quebec. Harry was a member of the Royal Canadian Army Veterinary Corps. His primary role was to care for horses that would be needed in battle. So on one of the train stops on the way to Quebec, Harry saw a bear cub outside the train window at the train station. So he excitedly exited the train and headed straight for the cub. Who wouldn't? The man with the cub explained that he was a hunter and he had shot the cub's mother before he realized that she had a cub. And he didn't want to leave the cub alone, but he knew he couldn't take care of it. So he was trying to sell it to someone who could. So Harry agreed to purchase the bear cub from him for $20, which would be, that was 1914. That would be about the equivalent of $600 today. So I'm sure that was a lot of money for a young soldier. So after he bought the cub, Harry scooped up the cub and he took her back on the train, much to the shock of his fellow soldiers and especially his commanding officer, who basically said, "What is that? And what were you thinking?" Harry declared that the bear cub would be the company mascot, and he decided to name her Winnipeg after the company's hometown. And by the time the train got to Quebec, everyone was just calling her Winnie for short. So once they were in the training camp, Winnie essentially became Harry's shadow. She followed him everywhere that he went. She even followed him when he went to take care of the horses, and she herself would start to bond with the horses. And if ever Harry had to go somewhere that Winnie wasn't allowed, he always found lots of soldiers that would volunteer to cub sit until he returned. So after about a month in the Quebec camp, the company found out that the war in Europe was getting worse, and they were needed there. They were needed in Europe. So they boarded a ship to go to England. Harry could not imagine leaving Winnie behind, so she got on the ship. She went to England with them. She spent 7 weeks with the company in England until the captain informed the company that they were needed on the battlefield. And as much as Harry did not want to part from Winnie, he knew that he couldn't take her on the battlefield. It was too much of a risk that she would be hurt. So he contacted the London Zoo in England, and the zoo agreed to take her while Harry was away at battle. While Winnie was at the zoo, she got along really well with the other bears, and she was actually so gentle with humans that the zookeepers let children go on rides on Winnie, ride on her back. Eventually, it was decided as she grew, and she wasn't such a tiny little cute cub anymore, she was a big bear. It was decided that it was best for her to stay living in the zoo rather than go to like a human home as a big bear. So she stayed. And one day at the zoo, a famous author named A.A. Milne was visiting the zoo with his son, Christopher Robin. Christopher got the chance to hug Winnie and feed her milk. In fact, he was so enchanted by the bear that when he went home that night, he informed his father that he was changing the name of his teddy bear from Edward Bear to Winnie the Pooh. His father was so taken by this that he started to write stories about Winnie the Pooh, and the rest is history. So I myself have been a lifelong fan of Winnie the Pooh and all his friends in the 100-Acre Wood, but I only recently became familiar with this story of Winnie and Harry through a movie version of the story called A Bear Named Winnie, which is available on Hoopla. If you are a fan of movies with cute baby animals that get into adorable mischief, this is definitely the movie for you. I highly recommend this one to all fans of Winnie the Pooh. It's a juvenile level picture book, so it's appropriate for most ages. And its beautiful illustrations by Jonathan D. Voss really show the special and heartwarming relationship between Winnie and Harry. It's a great book all around, a real feel-good story if you're looking for something like that.
Love that story. I was not familiar with this book. There's another book called Winnie, and I'm not going to remember the rest of the title, that I was familiar with. So I knew a little bit about the story, but I didn't know as much. So yay. Thank you, Jessica. You can't have too much Winnie the Pooh. I just feel like you can't.
Absolutely.
And now we will have Kristen share what she has been reading.
Okay, so I think what I'm going to start with is the title The Butcher and the Wren by Elena Urquhart. This is one that I probably would not have picked up, but like Jessica said, I am trying to read outside of my normal wheelhouse. But also it's helpful when you listen to a podcast and the author, one of the co-hosts of the podcast also comes out with a new book. So I was like, ooh, I gotta try it. So Elena Urquhart, she's actually an autopsy technician, and she's the co-host of a podcast called Morbid, which is a true crime podcast, but they also do like spooky stories, and they look into historical things. They have guest appearance, things like that. So it's kind of all things spookiness. And so I picked this up because at one of the end of the episodes, they had kind of a snippet of it, and it was the audiobook version. And I immediately was sucked in. This book is amazing. It's definitely like a horror suspense book. It follows Wren Muller, who is an autopsy technician, and it's based in the Louisiana Bayou, and it's her story of her method through these different murders that are happening in Louisiana. And the way the book is set up is it's set up from her experience, kind of like finding the crime scenes, going through these, getting through the material, helping the detectives with the information. And then it'll go through this character named Jeremy. And Jeremy is the serial killer. So he's the one who's doing all the work, and then she ends up finding it. So it's kind of like this cat and mouse game, but you don't realize they're connected until later in the story when she throws in this big giant surprise. And I was like, what? And it blew my mind. It was amazing. So the way that it's written, super awesome. Like Ashley said, sometimes with books where they go back and forth between things, it gets a little confusing for me. So I kind of have to slow down. was not the case with this one. I was able to get through this pretty quick. And I wanted to look up how many pages it was, but it's a relatively short book. I think I read it in maybe about 2 or 3 days. In fact, if you enjoy audiobooks, I would suggest doing that because they have 2 different people who are doing the narrations for the characters, which is really nice. And actually I did both because I would read and then I would be like, I don't want to stop reading, but I have to go do things. So then I would turn the audiobook on. So it's one of those books. And so it's just really fascinating because you end up finding a lot about Wren and how she lives because of certain things that have happened in her past. And then it's also interesting because you are literally in the mind of this serial killer, which is a little bit intense, but it's super fascinating to see how things come together during the book. I will say that this is the first in a series. She's already working on the second, which I was very happy to find out because the ending, I was like, what? Like, there's got to be other stuff going on. The ending is absolutely nuts. There's a really good twist in the middle. It's awesome. I highly recommend this book. Even just the way that she wrote it, because she has... Oh, and excuse me, she's not an autopsy tech. She's a forensic pathologist. So her job is to study serial killers and their methods and stuff. So that would be why she's working with the detectives. But because the author, Elena Urquhart, has the information from being an autopsy technician, she gives these really not rich details, but she gives these details into this crime, like these crime scenes that like are super interesting. So if you're into true crime, that kind of thing, suspense, this is likely for you. Also, coming from a morbid listener and hearing the cases that they talk about, I can tell that she pulled from different cases throughout history and kind of created Jeremy through different historical cases that have happened. And that was really crazy to see. And she's talked about that before. So that was just really interesting to see the character formation. So yeah, that's The Butcher and the Wren. Highly recommend.
Sounds like a good weekend read.
It is. Like I said, it's pretty quick, but it's so submersive that you like once you're in it, it's hard to get out. And the next one I think is The Red Garden, and this one's by one of my favorites, Alice Hoffman. Usually when I find a series by an author that I really like, I'm hesitant to read other books by that author because in my mind, I'm like, you can't get any better than this. So if you've watched these before, you know that Practical Magic that series is one of my favorites. So I came across this one just by kind of like looking for different titles, and this one came up and I thought, I'll give it a try. And another reason I was hesitant was because this book, follows a long time span. So there's lots of mini stories within this central idea. And in my brain, it really compared to the movie Big Fish, if you've ever seen that, because the central figure is the father and he's telling all of these stories that he's told since his son was little, but it's all about these individual people and their experiences when they're all connected. So the base of this book is about this town called Blackwell, Massachusetts, and it starts way in the beginning with the founders. So the founders come over from Europe and they try to establish this town. And of course, it's really hard. It's harsh weather. This story specifically focuses on a woman and her experiences. She got married very young. Her marriage is not good. She doesn't like it. And she decides, I either have to take control of this situation or nobody is going to make it. There's no food. They can't get their farm going. So she ends up going out to try to find help in this storm. And she ends up meeting this bear. And she has this really kind of like out of body experience with this bear where she kind of creates this connection with it. And so the first story is about her establishing this community. So the bear is very important, but it's also not important. It's like a pivotal moment in her life, and it carries out through the book, but it's not like it's a main character. So it's basically, the beginning is with her. She ends up having a child in her marriage, and then it kind of trickles down through different people. So like her child meets somebody, different things like that. The characters that are in this story are amazing. They're just when I was reading this, I would just kind of like stop after reading a section and just be like, okay. There's another one where it's these two gentlemen guys, they're younger guys. They come into the town and they have these seeds, and they are very much about almost like a religious aspect, but it's not necessarily like about God, but they are planting these trees, and they're just very much attuned to like nature, and they're almost on like a hunger strike. All of the stories are very strange, but they're put together in such a way that is very appealing, and it's very beautiful to read. Yeah, there's so many different things that go on through it. And then another central part of this book, which is why it's called The Red Garden, is in Blackwell, Massachusetts. There has always been this one garden, and people have tried to cultivate this garden, but nothing but red grows in it. Only red plants, red dirt. And so it's this mystery within this town, and people find themselves drawn to the garden. The garden teaches them lessons throughout their time, and they either stay within the town or they leave and do other things. So it was really beautifully written. I feel like Alice Hoffman could write a book about like peeling potatoes, and I would be like, this is amazing. Like, I love her writing style. Everything has like a touch of magic with her. I feel like everything's very magical, and like even she finds like mundane things, just like weird quirky things, like a guy who has seeds for trees, and he just comes to your town, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But there's, love stories that are in it. It's like love lost, love that you have, but then you have to give it away. It's a really beautiful book. It encompasses a lot. I really enjoyed it. It's not super long, and it's not confusing. Even though you have all those separate stories, they branch and kind of formulate together. So it wasn't confusing at all. Yeah, so I highly recommend that one as well.
Thank you, Kristen. Because of you, Alice Hoffman is on my to-read list. I haven't done it yet, but she is there. And anytime somebody comes in and checks out an Alice Hoffman book, I'm always like, oh, I've heard she's amazing. You're going to love this. I can't speak personally, but she's amazing.
Yeah, I love her. But that definitely might be outside your wheelhouse, because it's very flowy. She's very magical, very flowy. So,
I take it back. Did she write a book about Masada in Israel, about the siege? I can't think of what it's called.
You know what? I think she did, because again, I'm hesitant to read much else about.
Yeah, because you normally read the Practical Magic.
She has so many other titles, and there are some that I should get into. But yeah, she does have some historical ones. So maybe I have read an Alice Hoffman, and I did really enjoy it, but I also am fascinated by the history of Israel as well. And she kind of tied that in some magic. So, yep.
So everybody out there, I've read an Alice Hoffman book. Good job. So, all right. So my books that I've been reading lately, both fall into the thriller horror genre. Sophie Hannah is probably the more mainstream. Sophie Hannah's written all sorts of mystery novels and thriller novels, and she was even tapped to write the new reimagined Hercule Poirot series. So she also has those books, and then she has a series set in Spilling in England, and it's set with the police department there. And The Couple at the Table is part of that series, but you do not have to have read that whole series to enjoy this book. So in the book, Simon and Charlie are on a vacation, and Simon does not like vacation, doesn't really like people. He's, a police officer, and he just wants to solve crime and not go anywhere. He doesn't like change. He likes his own house. I feel you, Simon. Charlie manages to get him out for a weekend at this very posh resort. So they're there along with, there might be 6 other couples, and each couple has their own little house on this British estate. But they come together for meals. So they come together for a meal, and I think it's the first community meal that they're all having. And the tables are arranged kind of strangely. They're set in a circle. And then there's one table in the center. So remember, they're all equidistant from each other. The table in the center has a couple there who ends up in a huge argument, just nasty, drawn out, very angry with each other, and they go off and aren't seen for a while. And the next thing you know, the wife in that couple turns up dead. And Hannah manages to set this up as almost a locked room mystery because it's like nobody could have done it. The couples all stay at the tables. So they're all seen during this time, and everybody's like, nobody left. It wasn't us. There are security cameras everywhere, so no stranger could have entered. And the husband couldn't have done it because he's sitting in like a fugue state when they're found, and the blood from where she was attacked is all over the back of him. So he couldn't have attacked her because he clearly, while he was in the room, he wasn't facing her and could not have done it. So who did it? So, and Hannah always, like, I don't know how to describe it. Like, her solutions are almost always like super convoluted, and yet somehow you believe them. When she's at the top of her game, you're like, oh, yeah, that's totally what a person would have done in that situation. I can see why that would happen. So I really enjoy her. She does have some hit or misses in there, but you don't need to have read the rest of the series. There's some personal dynamics between the two police officers, Charlie and Simon, that if you haven't read the other books, you might be like, oh, okay. But it doesn't affect the main mystery. So Sophie Hannah, The Couple at the Table, probably a weekend read. If you like thrillers and mysteries, it's a good one. My other book is by Grady Hendrix, who I've probably talked about on here before because he wrote My Best Friend's Exorcism, which I know I've talked about. He's also, so they made My Best Friend's Exorcism into a movie that's available on Amazon Prime. Please don't watch it. I was terribly disappointed in it. The book is 1,000 times better. There are some things that should be left to your imagination, and that book is one of them. So don't watch the movie. But apart from that, so My Best Friend's Exorcism, he's done Horror Store. He's done the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, I think. He's done a lot. Well, his latest one is How to Sell a Haunted House. And after My Best Friend's Exorcism, this is my favorite Grady Hendrix novel, which is saying a lot. It's just, I feel like it has everything for a horror novel. It is wildly bizarre, and yet the human emotions in it are completely believable. So it's genuinely horrifying in spots where like, oh, I'm glad I'm not in that situation. It hits all the right horror tropes where you're like, no, run the other way. For the love of God, the other way. Or I don't know, maybe don't stay in the house. Maybe don't do that. But it hits all those tropes. And the amazing thing is it was genuinely moving. Like the last paragraphs in this book, I genuinely feel are perfect. Like you need to read the whole book for them to be moving. But I was like, oh my goodness, I closed it. I was like, way to go. I love this book. So here's the premise. Louise, who lives in San Francisco with her daughter, has returned to Charleston because her parents have died suddenly in a car accident. She didn't have a super close relationship with her parents. And her brother is still in Charleston, and she really doesn't like her brother. Her view of her brother is her parents gave him everything and he squandered it, and then he'd ask for more and he doesn't do anything. And so she's in Charleston. She wants to get in, get the funeral done, get the house sold, and get out. And of course, that isn't going to happen. And so things conspire against her, and the funeral isn't going together the way that she had hoped it was going to go. The house isn't selling the way it's going to go. And as soon as she enters the house, she feels all those family dynamics that, most families have something that's really hard and complicated. She's dealing with a whole lot of grief, all of these emotions from her past. So all of that is happening. And also, there are puppets and creepy dolls and a taxidermied squirrel nativity. All of that is in there. The house is weird. There's weird sounds. It even gets to the point that the real estate agent says, I can't sell this house because it's haunted. And so now she's like, how are we going to sell this? She has to work with her brother. And it is, like I said, it's wildly bizarre, super horrifying, super funny in spots. But also I love how Hendrix brings together the relationship between Louise and her brother, because your view of both of them changes over time as you get to know them both better. So yeah, creepy haunted house novel, if you're into that sort of thing, and I feel like everyone should be, then you definitely want to pick up this Grady Hendrix. And if you've tried him before and didn't love him, I feel like you'll like this one. So How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix, 2 thumbs up. So thank you to all of you for listening to us. Thank you to each of you for sharing the books that you've been reading. And we look forward to coming back in February and sharing more books that we're excited about. Thanks. Bye.